Hey YouTube, Paul Oz here. I just wanted to make a video about writing melodies to songs that you think deserve a good melody. This is the Steve Vai approach here, so it's if you've seen a few of his videos on how to write melodies, then you'll understand and recognize this. It's quite an interesting technique. It's basically just humming along to whatever chord you're playing, which sounds pretty basic, right? But, you know, common sense is hard to come by, hence Steve Vai, being the genius that he is, realized this and educate a lot of people about it. So what I'm doing is taking this stacked up 7 chord, it's a C7 with a G7. So what it sounds like is this. If you want the frets, it's 8th fret on the low E, 10th fret on the A, 9th fret on the D, 11th fret on the G. So I'm obviously using a distorted sound because who doesn't want to use a distorted sound? Sorry, buddy. And so what I ended up doing was I used this big C7, G7 thing chord. Don't know the proper name. Fuck it, right? And I ended up humming along to it. And all of a sudden I have a melody that kind of sounds cool, right? At least I think it sounds cool. It's the beginnings of a melody. You can start adding stuff to it. So for example, you saw what it was. Let's start adding a little pre-bend. It starts to get a little funky, a little bit different from the original melody. So here's the thing, I suppose, when you start to apply techniques to this melody that you hum and then transpose over the fretboard. Try and keep the length of the notes the same, but do different things to the notes. So you can pre-bend down. Like that, right? You can keep it the same length and you can staccato pick it and all that stuff as well. So okay, let's do another one. Let's do an E major. Very happy, less melancholy than all those 7 stacked up and pretending to be jazz. So E major. I'm already very... I did that on the spot. I swear to you I did that on the spot. That's why I made a mistake and I had to probably edit that out. So pretty simple, right? And I already started to add it. It's very easy to do, is the point, right? Like, someone who can barely sing and just enough to hit a note and sings along with the guitar a little bit, just goes with it so much as, you know, instead of practicing so hard, it's more like a go with it. The practicing thing comes in when you try to transpose from voice into fretboard. In this case I would suggest singing along with your scales as you're doing them. And that's basically what I did, and I'm able to write whatever, you know. It's an interesting way to write music and melodies, and I think it's the most relevant way to write it for a person who's trying to write instrumental music. Because then you can sort of logically, even despite being creative in this way, you can logically start to apply little techniques, little little things, making it a little bit spicier. But the basic rule of thumb is to keep the note about the same length as when you originally hummed it. I think that if you impose that upon yourself, it makes you work within a framework of boundaries in terms of time, which keeps you in time, but also keeps it, you know, interesting. You can start to see, okay, well, what works? So what is this? Very major sounding. So, you know, you can start building, is the point. There's an infinite amount of possibilities. For homework, try G major. More like for homework, be in tune. So G major, right? And hum something. So do G major and E major and try to sing along with it. Those are pretty easy chords to play and to hum along to. Practice humming along with your scales, if nothing else, if you're afraid of singing or whatever, and that should help you get the right parts and techniques going so that you can start to write melodies fairly easily. I hope you enjoyed this video. I definitely love this technique of writing. For a lot of people it might be already common sense to do this sort of thing, but for me it was a really big revelation just because I came from the school of only really knowing about guitars and maybe a little bit of piano instead of coming from a vocal discipline. So things get learned in a different way, and this is where having multiple instrumentation might come in handy, right? Like the percussiveness of the drums and the percussiveness of the bass being used on the guitar is still kind of ridiculous, but there's an example of Tosin Abasi from Animals as Leaders as making a really percussive and heavy sound, and it sounds really like the tone is like completely nothing to do with guitar. It's not exactly melody driven when he's doing all these percussive techniques, because how can it be? But that's what makes it interesting. So this is in a vocal way, learning how to use your voice as a natural, organic way to make melodies. So yeah, please subscribe if you haven't already. If you don't plan on it, if you're gonna say hateful shit, I'll just tell you to fuck off and eat some shrimp. And hey, I used to be a lawyer. Hey, look, come look. I told you I used to be a lawyer.